The following is a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio. Keep your mission on your mind and your mind on your mission. This is Mission Minded with Michael Coleman.
Keep your mind and your mission on your mind. This is called Mission Minded. Of course, Mission Minded, I see mindness. It's kind of a mindness or a mind dead. It doesn't matter whether it's a current thing or whether it's a past thing. You just keep your mission in front of you and you're going to do really, really well. Michael Coleman will help you do that, CEO of the Heart of Alabama Food Bank. Michael, we just had an election. I think it's been pretty smooth. The transition obviously coming up a little bit later on in January. And now Donald Trump is picking and choosing all the people he wants in his cabinet, which we knew was going to be kind of fun, right? I mean, he's going to pick. Elon Musk is obviously one of those guys that is somewhere in his cabinet. And I thought it was really interesting when Zelensky was actually visiting, or I guess he was on the phone congratulating Donald Trump on winning the election. And there's Elon Musk in his office. And when you're the most powerful man in the world, you can call the second most powerful man in the world, and he can join you in his office. But you found something really interesting on the Business Insider. And this is something where I think, and I'm glad you sent it to me, I think that everyone should read it. Employees, owners, business people. I'm a self-employed guy. I wanted to read this. What it comes down to is what Elon Musk does in his businesses to be as successful as he actually is. Let's back it up just a little bit right off the bat. I know that, read Elon Musk books and everything else. He's obviously the richest man in the world. And you could sit there and say, well, he must be the best businessman because of that. Is it true? Or when you've got a lot of money to play with, you can enforce a lot of different things. But also, he lost $60 billion in the stock market a couple weeks ago. $60 billion. I mean, if you and I lost $60,000 in the market one day, I would cry, right? He lost $60 billion and he's trying to cut those costs. And that's something that he does, but a lot of people don't like it. But I think when you read why he does what he does, and we will tell you those things, it's business. You can't get your feelings hurt. You can't. And he's going to do things the way he wants to do them. And so far, so good.
Yeah, I would tell you, every time I hear him in interviews, I'm really fascinated at his perspective on things. I was reading this article. I'm very impressed on one level. And then I also think that some of it does feel a little over the top, but you understand, there's a purpose in his madness. And one of the things that he spoke about was that while he was doing, of course, he's running these huge companies. I mean, he has SpaceX, he has Tesla, and then he goes on and buys Twitter, and you're like, how does he have the time to focus? Because really what it is, it's about changing company culture. And so when he's coming in from a government efficiency perspective, is how do you create government efficiency? And when you look at how he's done as a company, he's done it, what some would describe as just ruthlessly.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are some things that he has done that I don't necessarily agree with how he went about doing it, but it's hard to argue with the results.
Yeah.
And I thought it was very interesting, though, because I think some people have talked about he's so brilliant, but maybe a little bit on the spectrum, and maybe has a little bit hard time relating to people. And that can maybe sometimes why he has this seemingly emotional separation. Like he can do ruthless things and it doesn't seem to bother him, at least emotionally on the outside. Well, he talked about that he spent 3 years, I think it was at SpaceX, sleeping on the floor. And I've heard that he's done that at Twitter. I've heard that he's done that at Tesla. But the point he stated was, he said, I could have walked, there was a hotel across the street. I could have gone across it and gotten that. But if he's going to be driving employees, he said he wanted to be able to suffer worse than the employee suffered. Now, that just unpacking that statement alone, because it's like, okay, well, why do employees have to suffer, and how do you? But his perspective is that I'm going to come in and I'm going to squeeze every ounce of efficiency. I'm going to pay you extremely well, but I'm going to expect you to be all in on this company. I'm going to expect you to work a minimum of 80 hours a week. It's going to be high demands, but the one thing I do admire in reading this is he was saying, I'm not going to ask you to do something that I'm not willing to do myself.
Mm-hmm.
So that changes the dynamic a little bit. If you were somebody who's just living a cush life and you're the boss and you're just grinding people away, well, that's I understand why people would be frustrated at that. But if you go into the company and says, look, I'm gonna pay you very well, but here up front, I'm gonna tell you, you're gonna work 80 hours a week. You have to be ruthless when it comes to efficiency. You have to be able to solve problems and not just bring me problems, not just identify problems, but actually solve them. You have to think outside the box. So I'm going to pay you for that, but uh, I'm going to be right here. And let me tell you some of the things that popped out that I thought was really amazing. And then we'll kind of talk about, is this going to translate into the government efficiency?
Mm-hmm.
So he even put, he has like a personnel handbook. You go into any company and it kind of tells you. And in that personnel handbook, he says, feel free to walk out of company meetings that are not productive. And so there's a story in here about this guy from the government came in and he had a 50-page slide deck, of just death by PowerPoint.
Yeah.
And he starts going through it. He's 5 slides into it, and a third of the room is left, has walked out. And he's like, what's going on? And the guy was like, dude, if you don't cut to the chase, the only one that's going to be left in this room is me, and that's only to escort you out of the building.
Yeah.
So the guy jumped to the last 5 slides, hammered out what he wanted to say, made his point, but it's that kind of efficiency where Elon Musk and Elon Musk is like, hey, if you have a solution and you can't be heard, they're encouraged to contact him directly with solutions. So he's bold. He thinks outside the box. And there are people who can work in that environment who will absolutely thrive. They're like, hey, this is high risk, high reward, but bottom line is I'm coming in this is going to be my purpose is I'm going to build the best spaceship. I'm going to build the best network system. I'm going to build whatever. And I'm just going to be committed to that. And I get if you're single, great. If you have a family, you're raising kids. I mean, there are days, I've put in 80-hour weeks, of course, but that's not the norm, especially I did that until I could get systems in place where people wouldn't have to do that. But it seems like, he drives them to that point, and then if he still doesn't feel like he's got enough efficiency, he'll cut 10, 15, 20% of the workforce. And then what he does is then he sees absolutely where something's like going to slip through the cracks, and he'll bring some of those back in. So it's not like he slowly gets rid of them. He'll cut large chunks and then bring back in only what he needs to
well, and it's probably why he can run so many successful big companies, because he can give out those jobs and those qualities that hey, listen, I need you to do. The one thing I'll say about him, and it's funny because obviously he has Tesla and that named after Nikola Tesla, and if you go back and look at their lives, they mirror each other a lot.
Yeah.
Now I know Nikola had a lot of mental issues, and the guy had all of his books, and
he was an absolute genius.
Yeah, absolutely, and lived in and still there are things that we're finding out about him that we could change now with our electricity. We just don't want to because we're too far in. It's kind of like we'll never do away with smoking, even though we know it kills us because there's too much money behind it, and there's too much free stuff that he would have that would kill the power companies. I'll back up and say if there's one thing you can learn from this, that's great. Not everyone, God didn't create 100 million Teslas, and he didn't create 100 million Einsteins, and he didn't create 100 million George Washingtons. These are really, really special people, and everything's just got to fall in line. And I really believe that he was put on this earth as a gift, and I think every inventor was.
Yeah.
It's not to say you can't make a huge difference in your world, but we all have our own gifts and our own things to do. We don't have to change the world, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you could certainly look at, and one of the reasons I think he's got that position there with Donald Trump is because of his Skylink. That's another company that he's got that has
Oh, yeah.
really changed the world. I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
as far as in warfare and everything going on in Ukraine.
Sure. Sure.
But the one thing I'm always a little skeptical of my doors always open because I think I see that every time we get a new boss. I had 17 GMs when I worked up at Cumulus, and every time when my door's always open, stop by any time. Well, the door was never opened. The door, after the first
Yeah.
few weeks, I'm always here to talk. And then, and coincidentally, almost every one of those GMs, like I had 17 of them, 2 or 3 years, they'd either have a heart attack or they'd quit.
Yeah.
It was very, very difficult. The one thing that I thought was really interesting, though, is the word efficient. If you go and look at this article, the word efficient is in
Yeah.
here a million times. And efficient doesn't mean cheaper. It just means
No.
getting, talk a little bit about that because obviously efficiency does make things more inexpensive. But you can't be efficient and be cheap when you're making rockets that are sending human lives up to Mars.
Yeah. Yeah. No, efficient is absolutely not. So just going to my own personal philosophy, when I came in and I've done with a couple organizations, I'm like, hey, when you look at there's obvious waste and what happens is over the course of time you kind of get, for lack of a better term, just in a groove. A leader kind of gets in a groove and everybody kind of knows their job. And, it's kind of, you stop paying attention to things and maybe you don't. And so what happens is you realize, man, our processes hadn't kept up with the latest technology. And so I bet we could do this same job maybe with fewer people or with um, and just going through that analysis. Now, that's something that I pride myself on here is pushing the employees to always say, you always have to ask the question, even if we're doing something good, I mean, we're doing it well. I still want to ask the question, okay, but could it be done better? If the answer to that question is no, no problem. I'm fine with where we are if that's the best, but let's burn some brain cells to figure out if what we're doing is the best. And so it's always a challenge because otherwise people get so complacent. And I think that's when inefficiency creeps in, and you begin to start allowing and just overall productivity and the desire to get better and all that. People just get satisfied. It's human nature. Um, but one of the things he instills in his culture of his companies is he says it's everybody's job to make this company successful. And he will fire you. As a matter of fact, there was something in the article that talked about he at 2:30 in the morning he sent out a company wide email that said if you're a supervisor and you have three reports that are not when I say three reports, three people reporting to you
Mm-hmm.
that are not excellent, or not this or not that, then you need to resign as a manager. I mean, so it's he I mean, and that's again sounds so drastic, but he's just like, let's just cut to the chase. He doesn't have the perspective of, you know what, you might could get there. I'm going to coach you. I'm going to do that. And that's where most of us are. That's where I am because I recognize, but I'm not paying people $400,000 a year or
Yep.
$500,000 a year. If I did that, I might say, look, no, you come in and you're gonna change the industry by making us the most successful. I'm paying you huge sums of money. Don't tell me you need coaching. Don't tell me, that it's just a higher level. And so he's just has these incredible demands. Um, but but he empowers people even underneath them to go, well, look, if something's blocking is keeping your idea or your suggestion from um, from taking hold or making the company better, I want you to say it. Now, when I say that to the employees, because I'm a little bit more relational, but it is relational is inefficient in its nature. Somebody comes in and goes, "Hey, Michael, can I talk to you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, pull up. You got a cup of coffee." We kind of take it slow. I let them unpack whatever they want to unpack. It's not terribly efficient, but we're not running at a pace
Yeah.
that he is. I would imagine when he says, "Hey, reach out," anybody can reach out to me. It would be almost like you would see, like, okay, problem. Here's one line problem. Uh, Previous attempted solution, one line. My solution, one line. I mean, it's going to be cut to the chase and everything you do.
He's the kind of guy that sounds like if you were like at the bottom level and you came in and said, I just noticed something like the soap dispensers aren't working really well and we could
Right.
change these soap dispensers. He would say, go do it then. Go for
Yeah.
it. And
Well, there's a,
he would just be really short. Don't ask your superior. Go fix it. Just take care of it and let me know
that's
how it
right.
goes. And then if it doesn't work, then you're probably going to lose your job over it. But I like going into a situation where there is no ceiling. I know a lot of people that'd be willing to work
Yeah.
80 hours a week if they can make $400,000 a year.
Sure.
As long as you're
Yeah.
getting your 2 weeks of vacation, I mean, I'll put in 10, 15 years at a company like that and pony some money away. So, it's like you said, it's not a great fit for everybody, but for the people that embellish that and love that,
Yeah.
let me tell you, if you put on your resume that you worked for Elon Musk, you're
Oh,
pretty
no.
much working wherever you want.
Yeah, no doubt. No
Yeah.
doubt. Well, there's a report that came out this week that because our government is so big, there's so much inefficiency. Boeing was charging on government contract. I want to say, I might have this number a little wrong, but it was something like $90,000 for soap dishes in the bathroom kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I think about, man, it could really be exciting to have him and Vivacek. I may be mispronouncing that name, but they're going to have a dual role. But that's the kind of stuff that's going to be so shocking. Now, I think he's going to be successful and unsuccessful. And so let me just tap. And again, this is just me and what I know about government and then Elon Musk mindset. So right away, anywhere he comes in, imagine you have a lot of career people that are like, hey, I need to do my 20 years federal time, 25 years federal time. I'm looking for a pension. I'm not going to do anything to rock the boat. And they're used to every 4 years or whatever having a new appointed person. But you have these lifers in there that are like, yeah, the appointed people come and go. We do some things differently, but they really feel like their job that they can push back on that their jobs are kind of protected. Like it's very hard to fire some of these government officials. And see, that's just where I think he's going to be challenged is when he comes in and he's going to identify a department is way too overstaffed. You can't just go in oftentimes in a department and cut 20% or 25%. He's going to have a hard time, even though there's some incredibly good government workers going in for the same amount of pay of what government positions are, which are set amount of pay, and then saying, no, you could do a whole lot more work. It's just going to be very interesting because you have some of the federal workforce is unionized. So a lot of his stuff is going to bring on a lot of, I would say, legal action. There's going to be a lot of stuff that's going to get tied up in the courts as to what he's going to be able to do and not do. But I think he will come along and be able to look at and make recommendations. Like it may not be the individuals that get changed. I tell you what may really change though is the companies that do business with the government, defense contractors who get billion-dollar contracts. And so he looks at those contracts and he sees some of these invoices that come in because no matter how big a contract is, it always goes over. And then you have people and they make the justification or whatever. Well, nobody in Congress, I mean, once you're $1 billion or $2 or $10 billion into a Navy shipbuilding thing, and they're 3/4 of the way through building, they're like, oh, I need $2 more billion.
Yeah.
I mean, you're already in it. You're
Yeah.
going to give them what they need. And what he can do is begin to try to instill a culture that on the front end of things addresses some of that. Like there'll be penalties or whatever. Like he's going to be such a tough negotiator and just say, if you want to do business, this is what we're going to be looking at. These are going to be penalties you're going to encounter. I mean, he can do that with companies because companies are coming to the government to do business.
Yep.
And so I think that's that's where instead of nickel and diming each employee, I think he can really capture a lot of that with the government contracting. And I'm going to tell you something. As a retired soldier, love the military, but there is so much waste and inefficiency. One thing, for example, is there's duplicative systems. Now, so you might have a communication system in each Air Force, each Air Force, in each service. So let's say you had an airman may use this government contractor to do this radio. It may be the same type of communications, maybe satellite communications, but they don't all use the same systems because they all have their like this defense Department of Defense director. This company is in his home district, or this
Mhm.
company is in this. So they're going to throw money there. I get it. That's just how government works. That's how politics works. But what ends up happening is then you get out there in these joint warfare exercises, and these systems won't talk to each other.
Yeah.
They don't communicate with each other. And then you're like, okay, we've got to get all online. Well, that means two of the services have to adjust to the one service. And who makes that? You see?
Hmm.
And then what they do is you have all these generals that butt ahead and go, no, this is why we do it. And so nothing ever happens. And so you just begin to accept the inefficiency. You begin to accept the just this is the paradigm. No, people try to buck the paradigm because they see it's not right, but then they can't get anywhere. So you bring somebody in that's not concerned about feelings, is not concerned about, and just ruthlessly goes through. He is one of a few people who has the credibility, the respect of generals because he's a genius. He's done it time after time after time with Tesla and all the companies that he has and Twitter. He's just as hard a worker as anybody, but so I do think he's going to make a long term impact with bringing a new mindset to government. I think he's going to get huge resistance. He's not going to be able to fire everybody that gives him resistance, but I do think he's going to bring in some innovative approaches and some ways to think around that. That's going to put a lot of people back on their heels. But all that's going to make the government better. It's going to make it more efficient.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why our government is if you can foil and figure out our government and move things forward, even if you got the Senate in the House, and it looks like Trump's got the trifecta there, so things are going to get pushed through much more easily. And I'd almost rather have it that way than have it split, because I know if it's split, we're going to spend 3 or 4 months on every bill because
Every issue, yeah,
everyone's going to
yeah.
vote along their. I'd rather things just move forward. Okay, it didn't work, pull it back. But the bureaucracy of having to deal with all that waste, because it's been done that way for such a long time.
Yep.
And even, a friend of mine, Gary Palmer, who of course just got reelected, he'll tell you, Tommy Tuberville. I mean, there's a reason why these
Yeah.
people. There's a reason why these people are in their positions for 30 years. It's a good gig.
Well, and I'll tell you you can go through any budget and you really wonder how things get put in there. I mean, they'll get a bill and they get so full of pork. And look, I 100% understand it that senators, I don't care how conservative you are in cutting government, if you don't go to Washington and bring federal dollars home to help with bridges, to help with certain projects, community projects, if you're not bringing home pork, and I'm not saying that all pork is bad, but if you're not impacting your community by your influence, you're likely not going to get reelected. So they know that. And but some of the things you wonder, like we're spending, I saw this report of spending um almost $1 million sending Egyptian kids to college in Egypt, not sponsoring them to come to America and learn. No, no, no. So you see something like that, and then one was, I don't know, $100,000 on a study to see if some bug is happy or not, and things. It's maddening.
Yeah.
Now I get how it's reported, and if we saw the full thing, you might, oh, okay, I get it. Maybe,
The headline does not always tell the story, what you're saying.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
But so I think,
My brother used to work for a company called Battelle, a corporation up in Columbus, Ohio, which was a federally funded corporation that did things like they would spend $100,000 on dropping a drip of water into a bathtub to see how far up the sides it would go, or
that's right.
whether you could hear a train, with your ear on a rail. And
That's
I was
right.
going, I was like, but I mean,
Yeah,
hopefully science will teach us something down the road. But anyway, hey,
that's right.
listen, we only have a few more minutes left. There was one thing I was looking through all these things that I thought was really interesting. He made people go back to work. I love that. I'm a people guy.
Yeah.
That being said, I'm sitting here alone in my house, self-employed. So I pick my own way. But I just think we get a lot more done by having human beings around us to beat ideas off of each other. I realize there are computer geeks. They don't need anybody around them, and that's a special job, and that's fine. And maybe he's got that at Twitter or Tesla or wherever else. But I love the fact that he's like, no more working remotely. We're not doing this crap. It's
Well,
not
and
COVID.
I heard this. I heard this report that after 2 years after COVID's over with, we're full 2, maybe 3 years now past the big brunt of COVID. That there are still government workers working at home, working
Yeah.
from home.
Mhm.
And the reality is, if you have a small company, and like there's times where I allow employees, if something's going on, to work from home. That's much easier to manage. But when you're talking about a federal bureaucracy, the bottom line is people are getting paid and not showing up to work. And who knows how many people are getting paid who literally are not doing anything.
Mhm.
And I think that's one huge impact is he will be able to come in and cut that policy and say all the federal employees have 2 weeks to return to work, and if you don't, you're terminated.
Mhm.
And I do think that that's a game changer.
It really is.
So yeah, I'm
Uh,
excited. I'm excited to see what impact it's going. Some of it's going to be funny. Some of it's going to be frustrating. Some of the stories you hear, some of it's going to be hard to believe, but
I
I
think
definitely think he's going to make an impact.
I think anytime you can get around someone who's a master and expert at business, and obviously everyone looks at everything he does with a microphone glass, and they're, oh my gosh,
Sure,
he's doing this, and
sure.
the stock is down 30%. Just chill out. I mean, obviously there's a process that he wants to go through here.
That's right.
But I do think he's a brilliant individual. I think
Yeah,
he's a brilliant man, and I think anytime Donald Trump could lean on someone like that to get it, and maybe he's one of the few people on the entire earth that Donald Trump respects.
sure.
Elon could tell him to get lost. He doesn't give a squat. He
That's
doesn't
right.
care. I mean,
That's right.
Donald Trump hasn't done anything over Elon Musk. Tax away. He can do whatever he wants. So
Sure.
I think it's really, really interesting. All right, mission mighty. Keep in mind your mission, and your job. Hey, listen, we do this show every single week, and I gotten several ideas. Info at TonyCurryRadio.net. If you've got any show ideas, you got any ideas you want to talk about? We always do emails. We're backing up on some emails. We can do some emails next week, big guy.
Okay.
And we can get to some of these things, but please send your questions. Info at TonyCurryRadio.net. Info at TonyCurryRadio.net. This show is heard at least 5 times during the week on TKR and Tony Curry Radio. It's very easy to download the TKR app. And then, of course, you can also find us on television on Fox 6 and ABC 3340 as well. And you might have seen Michael on there several times doing a wonderful job for the Heart of Alabama Food Bank. So keep that in mind and keep those emails coming. Coming up next, Bite by Bite, which is something that we love to do. It's a little shorter version. It's kind of the same thing, but it's really about feeding America. It's really about specifically what you do in the beautiful tribes of Montgomery, Alabama. So we'll get into that next right here on Tony Curry Radio. Thank you, my friend.
All right, buddy. Appreciate it.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.